I could do it in Spanish, but I do not think that would be helpful. So I choose to talk to you in English.
Maria, sorry.
Yeah?
I think that's better to use the microphone because
Maybe the English use the microphone is better.
Yeah. So is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I have to talk in English, but my Portuguese is understanding a few words and that's it. I'm very pleased to have the chance here to talk to you. And it is not really only me talking here, it is basically a group. And maybe it was a very good idea to call Christian Burns, because he's burning for the research we are doing. And I'm very glad for this. And the only reason that I give the talk is because it takes more time to switch talkers, and so, but the questions you will be asking to both of us. Ademir asked me to present our home university, to give some idea where do we come from, so this is the first thing I will do. Then he asked me to talk what is plant protection in organic agriculture. Then he asked me to talk what research are we doing. Then he asked me to tell you what are we doing in Oscar, in our project that we are doing together here with the people here at IAPAR. So I will try not to be too long, and maybe I will jump some things, but I would like to give you first a very brief introduction of where we come from and who we are. So I myself, my name is Maria Finckh. This is not the name you see here. This is because I first talk about our Faculty of Organic Agricultural Sciences at the University of Kassel, and our current dean is Ute Knierim, and the Dean of Studies is Bernhard Trosbach. They basically run the administrative tasks of the faculty. The faculty is, belongs to the University of Kassel, which is situated in the middle of Germany. You see here Kassel, you see here Witzenhausen, and this is the Germany, which is a little bit bigger than Paraná. But so we are small in comparison to the country of Brazil, of course. Witzenhausen is very special because it is the smallest university town in Germany, and it's also very small with respect to the rest of the world. The University of Kassel was founded in 1971 only, so it is a new university, and we have currently about 22,000 students and 10 different faculties, and one is us. So the faculty, the school started much earlier, and it started in colonial times, and it is important to remember this, that it was founded as a school for people to learn how to colonize, and basically how to run large labor forces that were mostly working like slaves. Luckily, this has changed over time. And after the First World War, the Germans were very lucky to lose that war and to lose their colonies. And this way they could change away from the colonial idea early on. And since 1971, the faculty was integrated into the University of Kassel. This is our place, and this is a very nice place because we are located, the administration, in an old monastery. So we have the nice old buildings from the 15th century, but we also have some very nice new buildings. Our laboratories are in there, we have research greenhouses, and we have everything to run faculty. We are, the history is that it was a normal agricultural faculty with tropical and temperate agriculture. But the students were very strong and very innovative, and they forced the university to change their thinking. And in 1981, the first professor of organic agriculture was installed at Witzenhausen. And it was only two places where this happened in 1981. There was one in Wageningen and one in Witzenhausen. So we were together the first. And slowly things changed, and since 1996 we have switched completely to organic agriculture. And by now we are offering 2 English language master programs on international organic agriculture, or nowadays it's called sustainable international agriculture, which is a joint degree with the University of Göttingen, and a master in international food business and consumer studies, also focusing on the organic food chain, which is a joint degree with the University of Applied Sciences in Fulda. So trying also to collaborate. The main aims, of course, of the faculty dealing with organic agriculture is to conserve and improve soil fertility, because without soil fertility, no organic agriculture. Also, ecology and environment-friendly based animal production is very important. Not only the highest productivity of the animals, but also have the animals live in as good conditions as possible. And we have a lot to learn. Then, of course, healthy and enough food. And biodiversity of landscape is very important. And sustainable development of the rural areas, ecological non-food production has become an important topic also. We have 20 departments, that means 20 professorships, and currently about €6.5 million of third-party funding coming into the faculty through projects. And we have a 340-hectare organic research farm, a tropical greenhouse, research greenhouse, and laboratories. So in the soil sciences, you see with the organic side, because we combine soil biology and plant nutrition. Because without biology, no nutrition in the organic fields. Soil physics and soil sciences, environmental chemistry, agricultural engineering. Then we have organic farming and cropping systems. We have crop production, agro-ecosystems in the tropics and subtropics. Ecological plant protection, that is me. Organic plant breeding, agrobiodiversity, grassland science, renewable plant resources, and organic vegetable production. We have animal nutrition and animal health have been joined, because no health without good nutrition. Animal behavior and husbandry also need to be combined, because if you want to keep the animals in good condition, you have to know how they behave and what is their natural setting. And then husbandry in the tropics and subtropics and animal breeding. In the economy and social and food sciences, it's a very diverse field. We have agricultural economics, developmental economics, agricultural food marketing, international management, rural sociology, food quality and food culture, and agricultural history. Just very brief view at the setup. So we have the Bachelor of Science, which is a typical 180 credit, 3-year bachelor program, followed by the possibility of 4 different master programs. 2 of them are in German language and 2 of them are in English language. One is the Sustainable International Agriculture, where you can also study organic agriculture. And food business and consumer studies, more the food chain, and here more the food production. Work in the field is very important. Teaching, generally, you need a prerequisite for the masters is degree in agronomy or a related field, and you can then specialize in these different fields. Just quick look what the tropical greenhouse is like. Because of the history of being a colonial school, the tropical greenhouse is very unique because it has only plants that are of use. So you find all the plants for, all the food plants, all the plants for building, for dyes, for spices and everything in this greenhouse. So it's a very unique place, connected to all the seed banks. Where do our graduates go? Most of them, a good part goes into agriculture or research or organizations, consulting, controlling. And so the organic, about 65 of our students end up in the organic sector. So this is a very nice result, and we are very happy because we see our students everywhere in this world by now. we are very small. Witzenhausen is a city. It has the city rights for 900 or 1,000 years already, but it has only 15,000 inhabitants. So probably not easy to imagine for a Brazilian. So now coming more to us. Our group of ecological plant protection consists, I have 2 permanent people working with the group, where Dr. Sauke is an entomologist and Dr. Christian Bruns is coming with me. He is sometimes more employed he has a permanent position in the faculty of a colleague on plant production, but oftentimes we have joint projects. And this is why we are together here. And he is an integral part of our group simply because we work so close together, especially on the organic matter management and soil health. And you will see this later. We have a number of PhD students currently, and they change all the time. This picture is already old again. Some people have left the group, others have joined. We do plant disease management, insect pest management, weed management. We are responsible for all this in teaching, and in general, plant protection in organic agriculture, which means prevention, soil fertility, systems management, and control. This means if we think organic farming and plant protection, we have to think very different from plant protection in conventional systems, because we have to work with prevention. Once a mistake has occurred in the field, we have very little we can do in a running year. We have to avoid the mistakes from the beginning, because normally we cannot come with any pesticides to change. So I always teach my students, organic farming is not low input agriculture. Organic farming is very high input of brains and of knowledge. So in my idea, organic farming is the highest input agriculture because it requires the highest understanding of ecology and the interconnectedness of the different fields. So, of course, what do we do? Rotations, biocontrol, biological systems management, and I'll talk a little bit about this. Hygiene and seed health, of course, is very important. There is some organic pesticides that are available, and very important are diversification strategies and breeding goals, because many of the varieties we are using nowadays are not optimally adapted to the organic system. So everybody basically knows that the time effects of rotation are very important to reduce inoculum in the soils. The soil microbial activity is usually increased by the diversification of the plants in the system, and there's of course direct effects sometimes with biofumigation and other things that may influence the system. And just one example, if you think about fusarium on wheat, it behaves very differently in the two systems, and that has a lot to do with the rotation. So when we think about conventional farming in our area, people grow wheat, maybe barley, and very often they grow maize and wheat in a rotation. Both are hosts of fusarium. And that means fusarium becomes a very important soil-borne disease. And of course, the conventional sector controls infections a lot with the seed treatments. We don't have this in the organic sector, but we don't really have fungicides to control the disease once it is on the plant, because fusarium is very difficult to control. And we have a lot of problems with mycotoxins. In the organic sector, until recently, very little maize was grown in Germany. And that made that the rotations were very wide, with big distance between wheat and with other crops in between. And the main problem was seed-borne infections, because we cannot treat with anything against these infections, but we didn't have that much problems with soil-borne infections. This may change in the moment people start growing maize and making the rotation different. So it's a matter of management, which diseases are important and which diseases are not important. Allelopathy is very important also when we think about diversity. So we know from a long time ago, for example, that oats have a very strong effect against microorganisms. And so this is growing barley alone and looking at 3 different diseases, the percent of the stems that are attacked. And then when the barley were mixed with oats, the disease on barley is shown, and you see that the oats in the mixture reduce the disease on barley. And people who did this research showed that it was due to allelochemicals that were produced by the oats. Biological control, of course, very important. We have the control of diseases, insect pests and weeds by using other organisms, the product produced by other organisms, or products produced by other organisms. So you may use Bacillus thuringiensis or the toxin of Bacillus thuringiensis. You may use plant extracts, or because plant extracts are not real organisms, but they are still considered biocontrol. Biocontrol aims at regulation of the pathogen or pest population, sometimes at the exclusion of the organisms, and sometimes it also aims at increasing the self-defense of plants by inducing resistance to make the plants defend themselves. We have a lot of problems with biocontrol because if you produce something for the sector to treat plants, to treat a system, you have to go through all the steps of biosafety. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. But that means it makes it very expensive. Also, if I find a microorganism in Germany, which is very good in our system, does it make sense to bring it to Brazil? I doubt it. And so we often have good success when we are in the laboratory, when we are in the greenhouse, but not outdoors. And so, again, very knowledge intensive. We have very wonderful examples where biocontrol works in a system like in Cuba or so, but this means there are some specialized people who are really attending to the system. And in a way, it is an approach that is very similar to using a pesticide, rather than thinking about the system as a whole. And this is why a colleague of mine from the University of Bonn, Richard Sikora, has developed a long time ago already the idea of biological systems management. And that basically means you integrate resistance and tolerance, organic matter, biocontrol, suppressiveness of the soils, mycorrhizae, all into the system and try to enhance natural biological control by feeding the right organisms in the right moment. So, still we have some pesticides and other products. We have plant strengtheners that are usually bacteria, rhizobacteria that promote plant growth. And we have some other products that can help plants grow very well. We have formulated biocontrol agents, of course. And we have some natural products. Sometimes those are minerals and other environmentally benign compounds that can be used. But organics also use copper. And I think it is very important to look at this topic, because I do not think that copper belongs to the organic system. Because, and there's many arguments that are being used. People say, oh, it was the first fungicide. When organic agriculture was defined, it was already well known and people had good experience with it. So let's keep using it, because it's old. A very good argument. Then there are many problems that we do not know how to deal with without copper. Very true. Who of you has seen sigatoka in bananas? Who of you has seen also coffee? And many of the other systems, Phytophthora and potatoes. We have big problems, and we do not have the solutions. And then one argument is also it's a contact fungicide, so human food is safe, there is no residues if you wash the produce. But really, and if we are honest and if we think about the ecosystem, we cannot accept it. So this is just some examples of organisms that are being used, a lot of bacteria, but also some fungi, Coniotherium minitans is a formulated biocontrol product, and there's many organisms being used for biocontrol, and they're very successful. And oftentimes you don't hear about them because they work. Coming to some of our current research projects in our group, we are currently concentrating on strategies to replace copper-based products as plant protection products in low input and organic farming systems. This is still a burning problem. Breeding for diversity. It's a co-evolutionary approach for disease management and adaptation to climate change. Biological systems management with compost, and I'll show you a few pictures about this. Resistance induction with plant strengtheners, virus management with straw mulch, and then, of course, OSCAR, the project why we are here. So just a few words. When we started looking at Phytophthora infestans in potatoes, in organic systems, what we found when we had plots using copper and not using copper, we had very variable disease reduction. Sometimes we had very good disease reduction, 90%. Sometimes you have very low disease production, because depending when you apply copper, depending on the weather, it will work better or not so good. And then we related always with the control plot where we did not apply copper and compared the yields. And so what you find, we have yields going from 10 tons to 40 tons per hectare, extremely wide range in our controls. And if you look at the disease control plots, nobody exceeded this. And so in the end, when you do a regression, we have a very poor R-square. That means only 30% of the yield variation can be explained with disease reduction. So the question is, what is it? So we looked more into what could be the reasons. What happened here? The regression equation walked out of this graph. What we did, we added not only the disease reduction to our model, but we also added the nitrogen availability to the plants. And so we looked at what is in the soil at the time of flowering, or 3 weeks after emergence. And we could show that if we relate the amount of nitrogen in the soil plus the disease, then we get a very much better prediction of yield in organic systems. There are exceptions, and this is like what you see here, when we had very high nitrogen inputs. And that showed when you look at a conventional system where the nitrogen levels are usually like here, this is not relevant. But if you look at organic systems, nitrogen input is relevant in terms of looking how important is a disease. It may look horrible, but maybe the plants already have a problem with nutrition, and then it does not matter anymore. And that's a very important point to check. Is it important to use a pesticide or not? So if people use copper, we tell them at least check if it's worth it. So we also did other work in potatoes. For example, with my colleague Helmut Sauke, they worked with straw mulch to see if they could reduce virus infections. And it works very well because the aphids are deterred from the potatoes by changing in light, changing in texture. There's side effects to straw mulch because you don't have to come here to see erosion. This is a potato field after a strong rain in early June. And so we lose a lot of soil out of our potato fields because the rows have not closed yet. This is a comparison plot, the edge between the plot that was mulched with straw and the plot was up here. And you see how the soil was flowing and then it was stopped by the straw. So in the end, we had about 96% reduction in erosion simply by using very low amounts of straw mulch. And it's nothing else but having soil cover. It's like this. Breeding for diversity is a topic that has been with me for the last 25 years. This is where I started with. Looking at functional diversity. Not just any diversity. but diversity that is aiming at reducing diseases and reducing environmental impacts. So you have distance and barrier effects if you put different plants of different susceptibility next to each other. And we have one of the biggest problems we have in modern agriculture is every year we put out seed of a controlled genetic composition. And out there we have all the insect pests, we have all the pathogens that can do whatever they want. They can evolve. But we keep our agricultural plants from evolving. And so even in 1935 already, one of the big American corn breeders was warning against the use of genetically uniform crops because he says they cannot adapt anymore to the pathogens. So, and if you look at organic systems, we have a lot of environmental, excuse me for that one, a lot of environmental variation. You see here nutrients. Yeah? Here maybe there was a mouse nest last winter. And so there's a lot more nutrients here for this barley than around here. Then pathogens, yeah? Not the whole field is equally diseased with Phytophthora infestans. You have spot with more and less disease. Weeds, this is an organic field. This is the conventional field 2 meters next to this field. So you have a totally different biodiversity in here. And this is when you look at grassland, a conventional grassland, and bordering to it, the organic grassland. So the biodiversity is always different. And this is the effect when you use populations of wheat that are diverse for resistance. For example, we have a population that is running now in the F12 year right now. And this was a year where we had a lot of rust in the field. Every single plant in here had rust. So if we look at the number of plants infected, 100% of the plants are infected. In the pure stand, 100% of the plants are infected in the population. But it is very clear who is doing better, because the population has a high incidence, but it also keeps the spread. So epidemiologically speaking, we always have to look also at the severity and not only at the incidence. Another effect of these populations, we had a very harsh winter that lasted not in 2012. We had, in the November 2011, our winter wheat looked nice. We had even emergence, all the plots. In February, we had 3 weeks of frost. From one day to another, the temperatures dropped by 30 degrees Celsius and we had minus 20 degrees at night for 2 weeks. And then we had no rain for 6 weeks. And this is what the stuff looked like in March. Everything looked dead. And this is what we saw in mid-April. This here are composite cross varieties, evolutionary breeding stock, diversified wheat populations. These are the varieties that were used for these crossings. And one variety you see here survived, was very good, adapted. The other 19 varieties are not there anymore. And this is what you see when you have genetic diversity. You may be able to buffer environmental variation. Oops. Then we have the other thing when we think rotations. In Washington State, for example, a colleague, Mark Mazzola, was looking at how can we make the soil healthy to grow apples. And the people grow wheat after they remove the apples for a year or 2 or 3, and then they come back with apple plantation. Because apples you cannot grow after apples. And so he was checking what happens if he uses different wheat varieties. And he was looking at the bacterial communities on the roots. And so you see here many different varieties, and you see also here a control with no variety grown, and then checking at what kind of, how many of these bacteria were found in looking at the soil and at the rhizosphere of the plants. So you can see each variety had a different community. He looked at many, many bacteria. I just use here the example of 3. Then he went and took the soil where he had grown this wheat and put apple trees into this soil. and he was looking at the infection of the apples with Rhizoctonia solani, one of the important diseases on young apples. And so when he grew lutein or penawawa, he had almost no disease. When he grew elton, he had a lot more disease. If he sterilized the soil with heat, the disease was highest, showing that there's very important to have a biological component in the soil. Of course, apples do not suffer only from one disease. And so it is not the point to say now everybody should grow lutein or penawawa. The question is, will we ever find one single variety that will do the job? Maybe better, we mix them. And so we have all the different bacteria in there, and depending on which pathogen plays a role, we have somebody against this pathogen. That is called biological systems management. The last thing I want to say a few words about is compost application for soil suppressiveness, because it has a lot to do with our work that we are also doing in Oscar. And this work has been conducted for the last 20, 25 years almost. Christian Brunn started with that as a bachelor student mostly, I think. Then continued throughout his degree, and he's one of the pioneers in this field now. So, and I want to say a few words from basic research to practical application. With basic research, you can show that compost works. Those are typical tests looking at what happens in two plants. This is pea plants. When you grow them, either in sterilized sand or in sterilized sand where you add some pathogen. In this case, it was Phoma medicaginis, a pea pathogen. At different levels, so low level, medium level, high level of Phoma medicaginis added, all the way to very high levels. In sterile sand, and you see if it's green, the plants are healthy. If it's black, they are dead. And red is when they start getting really, really ill. And you see that the more inoculum is added, the blacker the thing gets. Typical thing. In the moment sand is mixed with a suppressive compost in the pots, you get totally different results. And you see the control again, it's very healthy. But here, where we have already most plants in the red sector, we have almost all plants in the green sector still. And even with the very high inoculum, we still have very few plants really suffering. And you see this also just looking here at the treatment with compost and without compost, what the roots look like.
What's the horizontal?
This is per mille of fungus, the infection level that we added to the plants. Yeah, so it goes from 0 to very high. So, of course, not every compost is the same. And so what you see here is a screening of 3 different composts. Compost 1, compost 2, 3, 4 different composts. The controls, we had infection level of 0, 1 and 2 again. So no infection, medium and high infection. And you see how the fresh matter per pot is reduced when there is just the sterile sand, from 12 grams to less than 1 gram in the end. And for 2 different controls, it did the exact same thing. When you look at the different composts, depending on the compost, they behaved the same as in the control, but even when they were infected, the drop was very low. Only at the high infection level here, this compost number 2 was reducing some, the others not. So depending on compost, you have different effects. And it shows very nicely when you look here, this is the sand control without compost. It has a fertilizer added, of course, so we equilibrate for the fertility that the compost is giving. And this is the same level with compost. So we have 0 infection, high, low infection, high infection, and you see how the plants suffer. 0 infection, low infection, high infection, and you see how the plants remain well. this we have to go into practice. How do we do that in the field? The main problem is we have to use very little compost in the field, because in organic farming we are allowed to use only 5 tons dry matter per hectare in year. This is 500 grams per square meter. This is not much. So if you just sprinkle it, the soil will be a little black. But what you can do, you can add the compost exactly where you need it. And so in the past few years a machine was developed where you could drop the compost in the row where you plant and drop the seed into the compost. And this is where you see the peas, and after growing for several months, you can see still the compost around the core of the roots. So it works. The same we did with potatoes. I don't know what happened here now. It changed the game. So we compared adding the compost here in the row or sprinkling the compost broadcast if you don't have a specialized machine. And then we looked at Rhizoctonia solani, which is the black scurf of potato. And if you look at the sclerotia on the potatoes, this was with the compost in the dams, just like what you see here. This was with the compost sprinkled, and this with no compost. This is the control. And here we look at the deformations and the dry core. And statistical significances are the same again. It was a long way to get there. And this is one of the machines that has been now constructed together with the developer of the machinery, with Grimme, who is one of the biggest potato planting machine constructors in Germany. And I would like to show how this works in practice. So you see here how the compost is coming down here in the compost application. You see here the potatoes falling directly into the compost. And you see how the dams are opened up nicely, and in the end the machine closes them just like a regular planting machine has to do. So this is a very nice system that also really works in practice, and the development is ongoing. And this is just a normal potato planter. So, but the firm, the company has worked with Christian very nicely to adapt the system and to get the compost applications optimized in it. There's a lot of development that was necessary, because you can imagine how compost behaves. It is not totally dry, and it should not be totally dry, because you want to have it active. And so the compost may stick to the machine, and you have to have transport systems to make sure that the compost flow is continuous. And so it has been, how many years have you worked on this now with the company? 4 years. So it's a long time, and you have to stick together, and you have to really work hard to get things basically for practical application.
Excuse me, do you think, Chris, that could be make some adaptation in this machine to working on the mulch, on it like a minimum till?
That's the idea in Oscar, that we should try to get this also done in a mulching direct sowing system. There is no reason why this should not work. And it would be very interesting, because if you have plant residues and you add compost, that should speed up the processes and also increase, it's like an inoculation with beneficial organisms. And so that's the idea, and we hope to be able within the project to make advances in this direction. And this leads me to the last topic, and this is the reason why we are here. This is the EU project optimizing subsidiary crop applications in rotations, OSCAR. You can look at the homepage of the project, at the public homepage, and you see you can find all the information. You can click on the different work packages and read more about what is all the details. And I just want to give a very quick summary of what we are doing. So the objectives are to optimize subsidiary crop applications, by extending existing knowledge and improving existing and developing novel cropping systems based on cover crops, catch crops, living mulches, and other subsidiary crops. And clearly, the European Union, when they designed this topic, they said, okay, who has experience with minimum tillage with cover crops? It's South America. And so they required that we find a South American partner. And that's how we found IAPAR. And it makes a lot of sense, because here there's a long-term experience and we can really look at things. So, soil conservation is a big issue in Europe now, because we have been not paying enough attention to it for many, many decades. And so they are pushing for minimum tillage. But if we want to do minimum tillage, we need the right cover crops, we need the right living mulches or mulch crops to use as dead mulch, depending on which crop we work with. So just to give you an example of a machinery that can be used in Europe, that the company Wenz is working with us, and Willem will show some more on this. It's very similar to what you see here. The dead mulch is left on top, and then you can also grow wheat, for example, with clover as an undersowing, and get the transfer of the nitrogen from one crop to the other. The partners in the project are...
herbicide is not allowed.
That depends. We have partners that work in conventional systems, and we have partners that work in organic systems. And so it will be very important to see how can we adapt in the organic system to work without herbicide, because this is a major issue, but it can be done. So we have partners going from Scandinavia all the way to Italy, and we have also partners here in North Africa, in the semi-arid area in Morocco, and of course here is IAPAR, which doesn't fit on the map. Yeah?
Just to mention this question of Mark, this comment is interesting because the Oscar is not.
We are coming to that.
It's not for all organic.
We are coming to that.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, but not that now.
Yes, I am coming to this now. Yes, you will see.
Yeah.
So the project is structured into work packages. This is a very typical way European projects are made up. So you can better define who is doing what. So of course there's administration, we don't have to discuss. And then the project is going around a multi-environment experiment that is conducted in many different areas, and several long-term experiments. We have a work package looking at new species and genotypes and additional uses for these species. Farm technology and machinery is very important. Soil ecological impact, methods for regulation, regulating competition in perennial weed control, phytopathological risks and solutions, and last but not least, the cover crop and living mulch toolbox. And we'll come to that. So the multi-environment experiment should provide a common experimental framework for part of the other work packages. Because of course when you look at diseases, when you look at the use of machinery, when you look at the use of new germplasm, it is very good if you can see how do these things perform in different environments. So it also has to serve as a demonstration and for dissemination purposes, and to supply information for the cover crop toolbox and serve as a demonstration for the dissemination. This is the design of the basic experiment. We have wheat followed by fallow, if that is the conventional system, and then either with maize or vegetables in a plowed or non-plowed system, using the direct sowing or not. This is contrasted to a system where wheat may be growing with a subsidiary crop with an undersowing, and then followed, which then will keep growing after the wheat is harvested, and then the maize comes later. Or the system where wheat is grown and then a cover crop is grown after the wheat, and then followed by maize with and without plow. So the interesting thing is that this will be grown, that will be done in 4 organic sites, in 5 conventional sites, in 2 low input sites, And we are combining many different additional questions. So some people work with different N-level inputs, with and without herbicides, and we are doing this also with and without compost application to see how the whole thing works. So we, in the end, will have this comparison for organic and conventional conditions, and how can we deal with less herbicides, hopefully. And then the long-term experiments, we have 3 sites, 2 in Italy, here in Tuscany, and in up in Pisa, and then of course here in Brazil, the long-term experiment that is run in Pato Branco by Ademir. And again, in these long-term experiments, it's the different types of cover crops are of great importance. Fertilization levels are tried out in Italy. The Italians are also looking at herbicide levels. So, new species identification. There's IAPAR is taking the lead, the International Center for Agricultural Research in the dry areas, which is located in Syria and Morocco, and we are dealing with the Moroccan IAPAR. And together with others, some breeding companies, the idea is to really look, can we find species and genotypes that are better adapted? Because most of the clovers have been developed for pasture, so they're very competitive. If we want to grow the clovers together with cereals, they should be less competitive, because otherwise the cereals suffer too much. So we have to look, can we find new genotypes? Can we find new species? Of course, we also want to do on-farm demonstration and testing and participatory trials with farmers to get into practice as fast as possible. Then, very important is also, if we use additional plants, we have to do something with them. Everybody is asking for renewable resources. It is not enough to just grow plants and not make anything with them. We know we can look at bioenergy as one additional use, but we can also use, oftentimes we know by now several of these perennial legumes have very high quality proteins that can be extracted, and maybe a replacement for lecithin that is coming from other legumes. And so we may be able to grow more of our own proteins in the more temperate zones. And some secondary metabolites may be of importance for medical uses, for example. Then the machinery, and there Willem will tell more about. We are getting an experimental machine, and I'll show this in a second. And then there's the Italian firms are working on direct planting of vegetable transplants into thick mulch systems. And of course, we are going to profit from the collaboration with IAPAR, with Augusto, looking at developments that are made here. This is the experimental machine we have by now. Which enables us to grow different, to sow different seed at the same time in a direct sowing system. This is Friedrich Wenz, who is the builder of this machinery and the designer. And Willem will say more about the machinery in a moment. We are looking, of course, also at soil ecological impacts, to look at what changes in the soil fertility, organic matter, microbial activity, look at sea sequestration, which has a lot to do with climate change, and if we can improve the problems with nitrate leaching and erosion, also looking at aggregate stability and other factors of the soil physical structure. Weed regulation, perennial weed control, very important, especially when you go to organic systems, but also in conventional systems. People have to find new ways of dealing with the systems with less herbicides, because that's also a request by general politics. So there will be a lot of additional experiments working on the management of weeds. And finally, this is in our task, is to look at the phytopathological risks and solutions. If we use many legumes, we may have many diseases. if we want the legumes to preserve fertility, they have to be healthy. Otherwise, we don't get the nitrogen fixation we are asking for. So there's a lot to look, screening, checking who is resistant to what, and what can we do, maybe by using biofumigation or by using compost. So we look at improved soil management systems. The people from Sweden are looking especially at biofumigation. We are looking more at the compost, so to see what can we do to improve the system. The toolbox is basically an internet-driven tool to make available the information to whoever is interested. We are trying to make the basic information available in at least 4 languages, and depending on the partners, we will have more languages. So that depends how much help we get in the translation, because it will need scientific people to do the translations, otherwise we get some funny results, as we all know. To promote the impact and awareness of innovative subsidiary crop systems and the associated solutions to ecological problems, and to allow direct contributions by the stakeholder community. We must not forget that Friedrich Wenz, for example, is a farmer, and he started as a farmer and started developing this machinery. And it is very often we are learning from the farmers how to do things better. And so we are doing very well if we try to have a two-way interaction, and not only us telling others, but we learn from them. So there will be a computer-based, publicly accessible information system with a decision support system, wikis, and an interactive discussion forum. And this is, you can already have a look at it, but it's just slowly coming up because the project is just 11 months old. So we don't have many results yet, but it's coming. So now I have been talking a lot. So yeah, thank you for your attention. And look, is it solar energy we are using, or is it fossil fuels? Yeah? Mm-hmm. And how are the renewable resources going in? But if we look at large areas in Germany are now being grown to maize in a totally unsustainable way, just to produce biogas. And this is nonsense.
It's absurd.
And so the question is always, do we exaggerate with something, or do we really try to design a system like you are describing for your colleague in Paraguay?
Well, and I think understand the way where we could get really sustainability is to be able to produce your own energy in our system.
If you don't take too much of the area, because you have to think how much area is available per person in this world. And here, I'm quite sure you can produce your own energy, because you have a much better climate. But if you go to areas where this is different, so I don't know the solutions for all places.
I agree that all the notes we see in Europe is very difficult to be discussed, because. But one thing I cannot understand, that still biggest, I think something of 70% of the farmers that here are doing no-till, they are doing still intense soil movement.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, no-till does not mean the soil is not
question.
tilled. This is actually a lie. It's just maybe reduced from plowing.
Okay, but this theme is, we needed some days to discuss it. All right, some more questions? Professor?
For these systems, you have thousands of plant breeders in the world. For organics, they're just, you can count them in one hand, 2 hands. Then the question is, for example, IAPAR, even the university, maybe the first step is to have plant breeders working with organic systems.
Wonderful idea. You have one breeder in your site, Dr. Nelson Fonseca. It could be you.
Então fala para o Augusto, né, já reservar a área de orgânico para o melhoramento fazer, né?
Yes, you know, Maria, in the comment, no?
Yeah.
But a final thing I would contribute, we had a discussion with Dr. Ulrich years ago, and I asked him if we manage that all humankind would live in the organic way. So we know that the production of food would be reduced something in terms of 20 to 30%. So, by this point of view, it's absolutely impossible.
We're currently wasting about 50% of our food by throwing it away, by post-harvest diseases, and we are wasting another large amount of our food by feeding animals instead of eating vegetables. We are making ourselves unhealthy. Currently, we have no problem, even if we reduced our yields by 20 to 30%, and if we ate something that was more useful to us, meaning less meat and more vegetables and less calories, I wouldn't have this. And probably we all would be much healthier. So it's also a matter of how we live. But currently, we would not even have a problem of starvation.
And even if you look to the African countries, in East Africa, you have a lot of strong erosion problems and everything like this. And we have a lot of nice examples now from Kenya and from India as well. We have organic systems involved there and implemented that they are much more sustainable, because people are not able to buy fertilizers, things like that. So you have another system of sustainability, and they have on their own country a kind of subsidiary system, and it works, and that is much more sustainable in terms of developing the whole area there.
And it's not only more sustainable, it's also more productive.
It is, yes.
We have in many areas, the organic way is the only one to stay productive. And I mean, a most impressive example is paddy rice production. We have the example of more than 1 million Philippine organic farmers using organic rice production. And then we have the comparison. We have a very large study now that has compared the productivity of the organic rice system and the conventional rice system. And there is no difference in yield. The only difference is there is, on the average, more than 100 kilo nitrogen less going into the organic rice fields. And the farmers have more diverse food because they have additional vegetables in their farms, and they have additional meat production locally because they have this additional food growing in their fields. And so it depends on where you look, if organic or conventional is more productive on an input by output basis. And that's why the number is correct. On a worldwide basis, we would reduce our yields, not only by 20 to 30%. There are areas where currently we may lose more, but there are many areas where we actually increase yields by doing organic farming.
I presume that you know that book from Montgomery, Dirt, where he explains that all civilizations destroy their soil.
Yeah.
And mainly, the main reason is the practices, the bad practices, mainly like plowing. Plowing.
Yeah, plowing, it's mining the soil.
Moving the soil that causes, that burns the soil live.
Yeah.
So, and here is a question that I would like to discuss. What is the system, the organic or the conventional or the no-till, that is able to transform soils like Cerrado in productive soil system? Because we have them in Africa, we have them here, we have them in Asia too, but the only system that is able, that is capable to transform bad soil, that is not able to produce nor rice, nor corn, nor soybean, like the Cerrado soils, you only can do it with no-till and rotation crop.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, how you think you could do it with organic, in the organic way?
I mean, if you talk organic, rotation.
Well.
If you talk organic, you talk increasing the organic matter content of the soils by organic methods. That means using cover crops, using additional crops. And generally speaking, any sustainable system will have to reintegrate the animals into the system. And also to have soil, have times where animals are on the soil and you have pasture and you have quiet to the soil.
Now my
And
question,
reduced tillage must go with it.
my question is how transform poor, unproductive cerrado soil into a productive system without putting in lime, we agree, and phosphorus, we agree, but without potash, without all that what we call chemical fertilizers, it is impossible.
Honestly, I'm not a soil
I think the only,
but
you understand,
okay.
but
Another
another,
one. You can use potassium sulfur. Is allowed in organic.
but how do it in
lime is allowed.
yes.
Okay, which more?
And how you, is there any example how to transform bad soil, soil that is not able to produce in his natural way, how you transform him in a productive system?
I think they are. You just told me of one this morning.
No, I'm talking of cerrado soil, soil that has pH or 2 something of this, organic stuff very low.
I mean, the first thing I would ask, I haven't worked with these soils, but the first thing I would ask is what used to be on this soil before we destroyed it?
Cerrado, ne?
Yeah. So is it a soil that is totally unproductive in nature, or is it a soil that in nature has a certain vegetation? And if a soil is totally unproductive in nature, I wonder if we should not concentrate on the soils that we already have. And I mean, we are just on the way to destroy all the soils that could produce. And I think it is more important to concentrate on maintaining and improving soil fertility on the usable soils than to go to the non-usable ones. Sorry about that, but
no,
I would
really,
like
I think the big problem is
but I don't know about these soils. I'm not sure.
I would like to help. It's not forbidden. It's not prohibited to farming in soil.
no.
No, even organic. So you can correct it. And as Maria asked, cerrado is one biome of very big diversity in Brazil. The most big diversity of fruits we have in Cerrado, and we are losing it because of agriculture is destroying the biodiversity of fruits we have in Cerrado. So I think Hart is asking how to make an area productive in organic system, but there is no problem to do it. You have to use alternative fertilizers, you have to use some other system, and no village is one tool we can use it.
Yeah, but
and so I don't think any problem he's saying and in an organic field. To chill or not chill is one tool, you can use it according to your system. So there's another perspective.
But the other thing is also we should look at the ecosystem.
Yes.
And I mean, farming per se is nothing natural. We are doing something to what nature would have forests, everything here, yes? And we are implementing annual crops
Yes.
in most cases. And the question is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And we should think on the long run, not only breeding for organic agriculture, we might even want to start breeding for totally different crops that are more adapted to these places.
Yes.
And then we may take our food from trees in the end, much more than from annual crops.
And much
But
more
this is
productive.
something we have invested 10,000 years in cereals.
Yeah.
If we
Yeah.
invested only 200 years in tree breeding, we would be a totally different place than we would be nowadays.
I'd
Yes.
like to add just a small comment in this discussion. For example, I think that this is good reflection. For example, we have a farm. I don't know if you'll be able, because we are living 1:30 here, we go to Kokari Cooperative. We have one farm in Marialva. He's a Japanese, Yasumasa Sami. He's a farmer. His son is working in IAPAR now. His farm, we follow him a long time, and he follows us also. IAPAR and others. He's a friend of Maurice and others. He's for 15 years. He's a coffee farm. It's 20 hectares of coffee trees. And for 15 years, he is not applying any chemical fertilizer. Não usa adubo faz 15 anos no café. Ele usa planta de cobertura, cover crops, mixing cover crops e some chicken manure. E colhe na média dos 15, 18 anos, 55 sacas de café limpo. A média do Paraná é 21, 22 sacas. Ele não aduba há 15 anos. E por que ele não aduba? Faz análise no solo, faz análise na folha, está tudo bem. Ou seja, ele reflexionou, pensou, viu, e os estudos mostram que o fósforo no solo, se você não tiver jogado na superfície, se não tiver enxurrada, se não tiver problema de
Circulação.
ele 80% dele, nós temos estudos de Danilo e outros pesquisadores agora que estão sendo publicados, você pode recuperar mais do que o nitrogênio. 80% do fósforo em cultura perene você pode recuperar. É o que esse produtor está fazendo. This farmer recovering 80% of the phosphorus with the pigeon pea, with the brachiaria, with the radish, with the cover crops.
Yeah,
15 years,
input of
no
brain.
chemical, and a good yield.
Yeah, high input of brain knowledge.
Yeah, this is the biggest.
But it's a matter also of us paying for the cost of what we are doing. What I said, internalization of the costs. If we had to pay for the destruction of the soils we are causing, we would treat the soil differently.
Maria, how would you address the situation like in a very large country as the US, where you have 2% of the population only in the rural area to feed those guys? Because you have to think of this situation. If you go to Africa, you have been, like 6 years ago, we had 60% of us were in the rural areas, and those people in the rural areas, they are not hungry. They always have something to eat, a pumpkin or chicken, whatever they have there. But how would we, I am very focused. I gave you a book that I edited in organic potato production, so I am a follow transforming agriculture into this, but you see there is this challenge. I don't know I'm not sure how much of our population is working in the rural area, but probably 10%, 20% nowadays.
The average of Brazil?
Yeah.
Or less.
Less than that.
You don't know what in 10, 20 years, who you produce fruit or whatever for us? I don't know. The machine alone isolated? Not. Did you ban? Who stayed in the field? Like you said, in the world is the big issue.
That's a challenge for very
Nobody wants to stay in the field.
Like we are.
It's also a
How
cultural
would you
challenge.
address?
It is also a cultural challenge, because as long as farming is considered the job of the ones who haven't learned anything and have not a chance to do something else, all the people will try to leave it. And we are not paying for the produce, so it doesn't pay to be a farmer. So why do it? But we are paying for health insurance, we are paying for the doctors, for all the things we do wrong, instead of paying for the good food. And so
for
as
drugs,
long
for
as we
medicine
don't change
drugs.
that, we will have these problems. But it doesn't mean you have to have 50% doing the farming, but certainly 2%, in Germany we are 3%, is quite a limit. Yeah? But the question is also, how do we look on this work? How do we look on what farmers do in terms of service to us? It's not only food production. They are producing a landscape. They are producing fresh air. They are producing good water or
Drinkable
bad
water,
water.
yeah.
That depends.
Drinkable water.
Yeah?
Yeah. This is.
But we have to help them. We have to support them.
Excuse me, just to add with the professor. Another thing, our politicians are thinking on it. I think just in money. No, you need more and produce more. And what about water, air, health?
We are exporting too much of water in the grain that we export.
Yes, absolutely.
Clean water.
Yeah, you are exporting. There's numbers on the amount of water that Germany is importing alone from Brazil.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Just by importing soybeans
Yeah.
and
Some more comments? Go.
Okay.